What? There's no interpreter. No way. Lily's voice, usually so composed, spiked with genuine shock, echoing slightly in the confined space of the taxi. She quickly tried to lower it, a flush rising on her cheeks, but the tremor of disbelief in her tone was unmistakable, her carefully constructed composure visibly cracking. Her eyes, wide with a sudden, dawning panic, darted around the back seat, as if desperately searching for a magical solution that simply wasn't there. They were absolutely, unequivocally supposed to provide the interpreter for this meeting. They confirmed it multiple times via email and phone. But now, just moments before we're due to start, they're claiming they didn't bring one. Her words tumbled out in a torrent of bewildered frustration and rapidly rising anxiety, each syllable laced with the strain of the situation. Could it have been those two men? I voiced the uneasy thought that had been nagging at the back of my mind ever since I dropped them off. The ones I picked up earlier, heading to your office? They're probably using the sudden, convenient absence of an interpreter as a flimsy, last-minute excuse. I continued, the pieces falling into a grim, predictable pattern. A blatant way to derail the deal, to create chaos, and then to walk away, blaming the confusion on you. A knot of cold anger tightened in my chest as I vividly remembered their smug, condescending conversation, their casual cruelty. If you're in a real pinch, Lily, if there's truly no other option, I heard myself saying, the words emerging before I had fully processed their implications. I can do the interpreting for you. A bead of stunned silence hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken questions. I speak English just fine, you know, I added, trying to inject a note of reassurance into my voice, attempting to sound far more confident and capable than I actually felt in that tense, uncertain moment. What? Lily stared at me through the rearview mirror, her expression a startling mixture of outright disbelief and a dawning, hesitant flicker of hope. Really, Ryan? You? You think you can interpret for a complex, high-stakes international business negotiation like this one? Her voice was understandably laced with a healthy dose of skepticism. After all, to her, I was just her regular taxi driver. Please, don't worry about my English skills. I offered what I hoped was a reassuring smile, trying to project an air of calm competence I was far from feeling. I have a lot of foreign passengers from all over the world, so I get plenty of practice with different accents and idioms. It wasn't a lie, not entirely, but it was a massive understatement, a carefully edited version of the whole truth about my linguistic capabilities, honed through years of academic rigor at Harvard. Oh, Ryan, if you really could. Her voice trailed off, the crushing tension visibly easing from her shoulders, her posture softening almost imperceptibly. It would be such an incredible, unbelievable help. A wave of profound, almost overwhelming relief washed over her face, and it was that look, that raw, unvarnished gratitude shining in her eyes, more than anything else, that solidified my unexpected, impulsive offer. Leave it to me, Lily, I said, perhaps a bit more boldly, a touch more assertively than I had originally intended. Lily let out a long, shaky sigh, a sound that spoke volumes of the immense, suffocating pressure she'd clearly been under for days, if not weeks. She must have been truly, deeply anxious about this crucial deal potentially falling apart at the last minute. I had casually, almost impulsively, offered my assistance, and now, faced with her palpable relief, there was absolutely no turning back, no gracefully bowing out. Honestly, seeing her so visibly relieved, the genuine heartfelt gratitude shining so brightly in her usually guarded eyes, I wouldn't have backed out even if I could have. A strange, unfamiliar warmth spread through my chest, a feeling I hadn't consciously experienced in a very long time. After we arrived at the sleek, imposing modern building that housed the U.S. headquarters of MW Corporation, I carefully parked the taxi in the designated visitors' parking lot, a courtesy reserved for important guests. I followed Lily inside, a decidedly novel experience since my usual role was simply to drop her off at the curb, a fleeting interaction before I disappeared back into the city's anonymity. Walking beside her like this, Two professionals heading into what was clearly a high-stakes, make-or-break battle for her company felt refreshingly new and, to my surprise, unexpectedly invigorating. She still looked tense, the fine lines of worry and sleepless nights etched faintly around her expressive eyes, but there was a palpable hint of relief on her face now, a subtle lightness in her step that hadn't been there just moments before. "Don't worry, Lily," I said, consciously trying to infuse my voice with a steady, unwavering confidence I hoped was somehow contagious, hoping to lend her some of my own feigned calm. "I'll support you with everything I've got in there." "Thank you, Ryan." Her voice was sincere, tinged with a depth of gratitude that felt almost overwhelming, undeserved. "You're truly a lifesaver." I had managed to quickly skim through the key documents for the upcoming meeting while she was on that frantic, desperate phone call in the taxi earlier, getting a basic, albeit superficial, grasp of the main points and potential sticking areas. When we entered the spacious, impressively appointed MW Corporation conference room, the atmosphere inside was already thick with a palpable, almost suffocating tension. The two men I instantly recognized from my taxi earlier, the condescending tall one and his equally unpleasant thin companion, were already seated at the long, polished mahogany table, waiting with an air of impatient arrogance. The moment they saw us enter, a look of thinly veiled, dismissive disdain flickered across their smug faces. The tall man smirked, his eyes raking over my admittedly casual attire with open condescension. "So, you're the replacement interpreter, are you?" His tone was deliberately laced with a sneering, patronizing condescension. "Yes, that's correct." I met his insolent gaze evenly, my expression neutral, refusing to be intimidated by his transparent, bullying tactics. "I look forward to working with you gentlemen today." "Humph!" The thin man let out a short, derisive snort of contemptuous laughter. A common taxi driver presuming to act as a professional interpreter in a deal of this magnitude? That's certainly amusing, to say the least. They exchanged supercilious, sneering glances, clearly underestimating the situation and me, but I remained outwardly calm, my years of patiently dealing with difficult, often irrational, passengers serving me surprisingly well in this unexpected confrontation. With just a brief, curt, and decidedly frosty exchange of formal introductions, the meeting began. "We are pleased to finally meet you in person," Lily started, her voice a little strained around the edges but maintaining a commendable level of professionalism despite the circumstances. "Likewise, Missy," the tall man replied, his deliberate use of the overly familiar and disrespectful Missy grating instantly on my nerves, a clear power play. Lily could certainly speak English to a proficient conversational extent, more than enough for everyday interactions or less complex business dealings. In an ordinary, straightforward business meeting conducted in good faith, her existing language skills might well have been sufficient. But this, it was rapidly becoming clear, was far from an ordinary meeting. It was evident from the very outset, from their body language and their opening gambits, that these men were not here to negotiate honestly or fairly. I knew, with a sinking certainty, that I would have to step in, to take control, and to handle the intricate, often subtle, nuances of the negotiation. "We believe your company's proposal is, in principle, a necessary and potentially valuable component for our planned successful market expansion into this new territory," the tall man began, his voice deceptively smooth but with a distinct, challenging undercurrent. "However, there are several crucial, non-negotiable conditions we absolutely need to verify and have ironclad assurances on before committing fully to this partnership. And of course, given the current volatile global financial situation," the thin man chimed in seamlessly, a well-rehearsed double act, "we feel it is imperative that we be considerably more cautious, more discerning, regarding the significant level of upfront capital investment that would be required from our side. And, most importantly, gentlemen, we absolutely need an unequivocal, legally binding guarantee that MW Corporation can consistently meet these rather demanding and frankly ambitious, performance metrics without any compromise whatsoever on product quality or service delivery. Uh, um. Lily faltered audibly, her brow furrowing in concentration as she desperately tried to keep up with their rapid-fire delivery, their deliberate peppering of speech with obscure, confusing industry jargon and overly complex financial terminology. They even began to speak almost simultaneously at times, their voices overlapping in a confusing babble, a clear and deliberate tactic designed to overwhelm, disorient, and ultimately confuse her. Their underhanded strategy was as transparently obvious as it was utterly infuriating to witness. They're essentially saying that while they acknowledge the potential value of your proposal for market expansion, I interjected smoothly, my voice calm, clear, and measured, cutting through their deliberate obfuscation. I hadn't missed a single word, a single nuance, translating everything for Lily immediately, concisely, and most importantly, accurately. They also need to confirm the specific terms and conditions they see as non-negotiable prerequisites for moving forward. And they need to verify all the conditions and safeguards you've laid out in your proposal. More specifically, I continued, my gaze steady as I met their momentarily surprised, almost startled looks. They require concrete, verifiable assurance that your company can indeed meet all their stated demands without sacrificing either product quality or the integrity of your service, especially given the current challenging economic climate. I see. Lily's focus sharpened instantly, her initial hesitation and confusion vanishing as she processed my clear, straightforward translation. Her confidence visibly returned. We have, in fact, already taken comprehensive, proactive measures to address every single one of those potential concerns. Let's present the specific financial projections, the detailed operational models, and the contingency plans we've meticulously prepared. I translated Lily's decisive, confident words into fluent, precise, and professional English, and then handed over the meticulously prepared, bound documents to the two men. The tall man and the thin man exchanged another fleeting, almost imperceptible glance of surprise, a flicker of something akin to consternation in their eyes. Their expressions tightened fractionally, their earlier smugness dimming slightly. However, they quickly recovered their composure, their masks of professional concern snapping back into place, and promptly resumed their concerted attempts to sow seeds of doubt and create an endless stream of obstacles. What about the potential risks, the inherent vulnerabilities associated with the new technology integration you're proposing in this plan? The tall man pressed, leaning forward in his chair, his voice taking on a tone of exaggerated skepticism. We have very serious and, frankly, quite significant concerns about back-end compatibility with our existing legacy systems, and more critically, the potential for substantial, costly operational downtime during the proposed transition phase. And let's not forget the incredibly complex, almost Byzantine web of legal implications and regulatory hurdles. The thin man added smoothly, his voice now dripping with feigned, almost theatrical, grave concern. There are numerous time-consuming regulatory hurdles to clear, especially concerning cross-border data management and privacy compliance, and any significant, unforeseen delays in that critical area could prove to be utterly catastrophic for the overall project timeline and, consequently, the budget. As they began speaking over each other again, their voices rising in a carefully orchestrated cacophony of negativity and doubt, I listened calmly, patiently, mentally dissecting their arguments, identifying the flaws in their logic, the deliberate exaggerations. But as they continued to relentlessly pile on objections, each one more convoluted, more designed to intimidate than the last, I quickly realized that attempting to translate everything verbatim, blow by blow, as they spoke would be an exercise in utter futility. It would only play directly into their hands, creating more confusion, more delays, and ultimately achieving their goal of derailing the meeting. We've compiled our comprehensive, multifaceted approach to proactively addressing all potential technological risks, as well as our detailed strategy for successfully navigating the complex legal and regulatory landscape, in this supplementary document for your review. Lily stated firmly, her voice resonating with a newfound confidence, clearly bolstered by my unwavering presence and support. I promptly handed them the additional document she had astutely prepared beforehand, anticipating precisely such underhanded tactics. Then, leaning forward slightly, almost conspiratorially, and lowering my voice so that only they could hear me clearly across the table, I said to them in flawless, unaccented English, "If your true, underlying intention here today is to deliberately and maliciously sabotage this potentially mutually beneficial deal, then engaging in a sincere, transparent, point-by-point discussion with you gentlemen is, quite frankly, utterly meaningless, isn't it?" Ah! The tall man scoffed loudly, feigning a sputtering, indignant outrage, his face flushing a theatrical red. "What in the world are you talking about? How incredibly, unbelievably rude of you to suggest such a thing. Are you seriously suggesting that we reputable businessmen would even consider doing business with someone who makes such outrageous, baseless, and frankly insulting accusations?" The thin man added, his voice dripping with a thick layer of false, sanctimonious indignation. "If you are indeed here today only to cause trouble, to deliberately derail this important negotiation for your own hidden agenda," I continued, my voice hardening perceptibly, my gaze unwavering, "would you perhaps like me to place a direct, personal call to your boss, to Mr. Harrison himself? Why on earth would you do something like that?" The tall man blustered, his bravado wavering, a visible flicker of genuine unease, of dawning fear, crossing his eyes for the first time. "Because," I said slowly, deliberately letting my gaze linger meaningfully on each of them in turn, "it seems I might unfortunately need to explain the full, unvarnished nature of your rather questionable activities here today and perhaps, just perhaps, elsewhere as well directly and in considerable detail to him." Uh, well, I. The color drained visibly, almost comically, from their faces simultaneously. They exchanged quick, panicked, nervous glances, their carefully constructed facade of arrogant superiority evaporating like morning mist under a scorching sun. From what I had unfortunately, but quite clearly, overheard in the back of my taxi, they were being paid a rather handsome sum of money by a rival interest to sabotage this very deal, to ensure it failed. To their boss, Mr. Harrison, who was almost certainly expecting a legitimate, professionally conducted business outcome, this would constitute a serious, unforgivable, and potentially career-ending betrayal. If they were extremely lucky, they'd only lose their jobs, their reputations perhaps salvageable. However, given their cavalier, almost reckless attitude, it was highly probable that their professional misconduct, their pattern of unethical behavior, didn't begin and end with just this particular unfortunate incident. Of course, I didn't know the full, sordid, intricate extent of their past actions, but crucially, and this was the key, they didn't know what I did or didn't know. They would surely, and predictably, jump to the worst possible conclusions, their guilty minds imagining that I possessed far more damaging, incriminating information about them than I actually did. And that fear, that gnawing, escalating fear, I gambled, would work decisively, overwhelmingly, in my favor. Very well. The tall man cleared his throat, a dry, rasping sound, his entire demeanor abruptly, almost startlingly shifting. Your involvement and your rather thorough explanations are quite sufficient, mister." He trailed off, realizing he didn't even know my name. Let's proceed with the partnership forthwith, under the previously agreed upon conditions and terms as outlined in the initial proposal." "Indeed, yes, absolutely." The thin man chimed in eagerly, his voice now almost obsequious, a fawning, desperate quality replacing his earlier sneer. "We very much look forward to a fruitful, mutually beneficial, and highly cooperative ongoing relationship with MW Corporation." In a state of barely concealed, escalating panic, they had completely, almost farcically, reversed their antagonistic attitude, suddenly and eagerly accepting the precise terms of the contract they had been so resolutely, so viciously, determined to destroy just moments before. Lily had been watching our hushed, intense, and increasingly one-sided exchange with a thoroughly puzzled, almost bewildered, expression on her face. When she finally fully realized that the contract had been unequivocally, miraculously secured, that the deal, against all odds, was well and truly done, her face lit up with a radiant, disbelieving smile, a smile so bright and joyous it could have illuminated the entire, cavernous conference room. So, she breathed, her eyes wide with a mixture of astonishment and dawning elation. The deal is, it's really, truly done? Yes, Lily, I confirmed, a small, tired smile playing on my own lips as the adrenaline began to recede. It's done. Oh, Ryan, thank you so much, she exclaimed, her voice thick with a potent cocktail of relief and unadulterated joy. This negotiation, this incredible success, it was all, every single bit of it, thanks to you. I simply smiled, a genuine, unaffected smile this time, feeling the warmth of her gratitude wash over me. A profound, almost forgotten sense of satisfaction, a thrilling, resonant echo from my past life, from battling fiercely in the intensely competitive, intellectually stimulating business world, a feeling I had deliberately, forcefully suppressed and long thought extinguished, swelled warmly, unexpectedly in my chest. It felt, surprisingly, undeniably good. As the meeting officially concluded, and the necessary paperwork was swiftly, almost eagerly, signed by all parties, the two men, now looking thoroughly deflated, resentful, and more than a little fearful, prepared to make their hasty retreat. But not before delivering one last, predictably bitter, parting shot, their voices laced with a sour, grudging resentment. Honestly, the tall man muttered, pointedly unable to meet my gaze, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Your interpreting, if that's what it was, surprisingly, almost unnervingly, impressive. Yeah, the thin one added reluctantly, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. Handling that rather delicate situation so skillfully, turning it around on us like that, with such precision. He paused for a moment, then looked directly at me, a sharp, inquisitive, almost accusatory glint in his eye. Why on earth, if you possess such talents, were you pretending to be just a common, everyday taxi driver? Thank you for your kind, albeit belated words, gentlemen. I inclined my head politely, a gesture of professional courtesy, offering no further explanation, no satisfaction for their curiosity. But I assure you, with all sincerity, I'm not pretending to be anything other than what I am. In any case, the undeniable, almost miraculous success of this high-stakes negotiation was a tremendously significant, game-changing step forward for Lily, for her burgeoning company, MW Corporation, and perhaps, just perhaps, for me as well. After the two chastened men had finally, blessedly, departed from the company building, their shoulders visibly slumped in defeat, their earlier swagger completely extinguished, Lily repeatedly, almost effusively, expressed her heartfelt, overwhelming gratitude, her relief so palpable it was almost a physical presence in the room. Ryan, thank you. Thank you so very much, she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy and relief. I honestly, truly don't know what would have happened today, what I possibly would have done, if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't stepped in. No, Lily, please. I deflected, though a part of me knew, with a quiet certainty, that my intervention had indeed been crucial, pivotal even. It was your meticulous, thorough preparation, your foresight in anticipating their moves, and your inherent, undeniable skill and business acumen that ultimately made this a resounding success. I just helped out a little bit where I could, that's all. That's absolutely not true, Ryan, and I think you know it, she insisted, a soft, knowing smile playing on her lips, her eyes still sparkling with that potent mix of gratitude and admiration. Ryan, can I possibly rely on you again like this in the future if something similarly challenging comes up? As long as it's genuinely within my capabilities, Lily, of course you can. Isn't there anything you can't do, Ryan? Lily said this with a dazzling, almost breathtaking smile, a smile so full of an almost childlike, unreserved trust and profound admiration that it made my chest ache in a strange, unfamiliar, yet not entirely unpleasant way. Seeing that unreserved, radiant smile, that pure, unadulterated belief in me, in my abilities, I could only manage an awkward, slightly overwhelmed, yet genuinely warm smile in return. As we drove away from her impressive office building, heading towards the familiar sanctuary of her home, the vibrant city lights painting mesmerizing, fleeting streaks of color across the taxi's windshield, she suddenly, almost impulsively, made a suggestion, her voice noticeably lighter, more carefree than I had heard it in many long days. Ryan, how about we take a little impromptu drive? It feels like such a terrible waste, almost a crime, to just go straight home after all that excitement, after such a victory. Should I stop the meter then, Madam CEO? I asked, a teasing, playful note creeping into my voice, a comfortable banter developing between us. Oh, no need for that at all. She waved a dismissive, elegant hand, a playful, mischievous sparkle dancing in her eyes. The earlier stress completely vanished. This is my little indulgence, my well-deserved treat, for both of us. That's remarkably, wonderfully generous of you, Lily. So, is there anywhere in particular you'd like to go? Any special place you have in mind? Not really, no. She settled back comfortably into the plush leather seat, letting out a soft, contented sigh, the kind of sigh that speaks of burdens lifted and battles won. I just, I just want to talk for a little bit, if that's okay with you, Ryan. I nodded, a sense of quiet, comfortable anticipation settling over me, and smoothly, expertly, navigated the taxi through the glittering, vibrant, almost magical tapestry of the sprawling night city. For a while, a comfortable, companionable while, we were both silent, simply taking in the mesmerizing, ever-changing spectacle of the city lights blurring past our windows, a peaceful, almost meditative quietude enveloping us within the cocoon of the taxi. Then, Lily finally spoke, her voice soft but clear, carrying easily in the hushed intimacy of the car. Ryan, she began, her gaze meeting mine directly, intently in the rearview mirror. What's really, truly, hidden in the deepest depths of your heart? For a long, suspended moment, her direct, unvarnished, and utterly unexpected question left me utterly, completely speechless. The usual well-practiced deflections, the ingrained, almost reflexive evasions I had honed over years of avoiding such personal inquiries, died unspoken on my lips. That's, I started, my mind scrambling desperately, chaotically, for a suitably non-committal, evasive answer. But then I met her earnest, unwavering, almost piercing gaze in the rearview mirror. She was looking at me with an open, almost vulnerable curiosity, an almost palpable, sincere desire to understand me, to believe in me, to see the person behind the carefully constructed facade of the competent taxi driver. In that precise, crystallizing moment, I knew, with a sudden, unshakable certainty, that I didn't want to utter some pointless, meaningless platitude, some glib, superficial remark that would only make her see me as shallow, as guarded, as someone not worthy of her genuine, unfeigned interest. It's not a very interesting or exciting story, Lily, I'm afraid. I said at last, my voice a little rougher, more hesitant than I had intended, the admission costing me more than I expected. But, is that truly okay with you? Are you sure you want to hear it? I'd love to hear it, Ryan. Very much. She smiled then, a soft, gentle, encouraging smile that seemed to possess the power to chase away some of the lingering, deeply ingrained shadows in my own heart. She looked immensely, genuinely relieved that I hadn't immediately shut her out, that I was willing, however reluctantly, to share a part of myself with her. After taking a few deep, steadying, almost fortifying breaths, gathering a reserve of courage I hadn't realized I still possessed, I began to speak, slowly at first, the words feeling foreign, almost alien on my tongue after so many long, silent years of deliberate suppression. Believe it or not, Lily, I started, my eyes fixed intently on the unfolding ribbon of road ahead. The city lights a hypnotic blur. I graduated at the very top of my class from Harvard University. As a mathematician. Really? Her voice was filled with a genuine, unfeigned surprise, a discernible hint of awe, of impressed wonder. You were. You were truly that incredible, that brilliant? But my doctoral dissertation, Lily, the groundbreaking paper that I had poured every single ounce of my life, my passion, and my soul into for what felt like an eternity. My voice tightened involuntarily, the familiar, acrid taste of old bitterness, of profound injustice, coiling like a venomous snake in the pit of my stomach. It was ruthlessly, deliberately sabotaged by my academic rival, a fellow doctoral student named George. Even now, all these long, weary years later, simply thinking back to that devastating, soul-crushing time, to that raw, gaping, still unhealed wound of betrayal and shattered dreams, was intensely, almost unbearably, painful. My spirit, once so vibrant, so incandescent with an unbridled, pure passion for the elegant, intricate beauty of mathematics, had been brutally, systematically broken, leaving behind only a hollow, aching void. I had lost all motivation, all desire, all will to continue my research, to even set foot in that tainted, corrupted world of academia ever again. That's, that's absolutely terrible, Ryan. Lily's voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet filled with a profound, heartfelt sympathy that somehow, paradoxically, made the painful admission, the dredging up of old ghosts, a little easier to bear. I had absolutely no idea, no inkling at all, that you had endured such a deeply painful, dramatic past. Since that day, Lily, I continued, the words flowing a little more easily now, the dam of years of silence finally beginning to crack, I completely, irrevocably, distanced myself from the entire world of academic research, from everything and everyone I had known before. And now, well, as you know, now I'm just Ryan, the humble, unassuming taxi driver. I attempted a light-hearted, self-deprecating laugh, but it came out sounding hollow, forced, and brittle even to my own critical ears. Ha, but you know, Lily, I added, a genuine, if fleeting smile finally touching my lips as a new thought surfaced. If I weren't a taxi driver, if I hadn't made that drastic, life-altering choice, I wouldn't have had the distinct pleasure, the unexpected privilege of meeting you. Now would I? Lily remained silent for a long, contemplative while, her gaze distant, unfocused, as she looked out at the mesmerizing, ever-shifting panorama of the passing city lights, lost in her own thoughts. Eventually, she spoke again, her voice low, almost hushed, but imbued with a startling, newfound resolution, a steely determination that sent an unexpected, involuntary shiver down my spine. Ryan, this man, this George, is he, by any conceivable chance, the rather prominent, somewhat controversial mathematician who's scheduled to visit the city, to come to America for a series of lectures and conferences? Very soon? I'm not really up on the latest academic news and gossip these days, Lily, I admitted, a familiar, bone-deep weariness seeping into my tone, the old apathy resurfacing. I try to avoid it, to be honest. But knowing George, knowing his insatiable ego and his talent for self-promotion, it wouldn't be surprising at all if he did. He always did have an uncanny, almost preternatural knack for garnering attention, for being in the spotlight. I see. Her voice was quiet, thoughtful, almost distant, as if she were piecing together a complex, unsettling puzzle. The parent company, the overarching conglomerate of the firm we just successfully signed the deal with today. They are, as it happens, one of George's primary, most significant, long-term financial sponsors. A cold, sharp, unwelcome dread, like a shard of ice, pierced through me, chilling me to the core. Then it seems almost unequivocally certain, doesn't it? The disparate, disturbing pieces clicked into place with an awful, sickening, and undeniable clarity. But honestly, Lily, I forced a tone of strained reassurance, more for her sake, for her peace of mind, than for my own. It truly, genuinely doesn't bother me anymore. Really, it doesn't. I'm actually having a surprising amount of fun, a quiet contentment, just driving this taxi, meeting all sorts of interesting, everyday people, hearing their stories. Just please go ahead and continue to do business with George's sponsor without giving me or my past a single second thought, Lily. I had almost used my own name again, a Freudian slip, a clear sign of my inner turmoil, my resurfacing anxieties. I mean, without worrying about me, Lily. It wouldn't make any sense at all. It would be utterly counterproductive for this incredibly important, hard-won deal to fall through, to be jeopardized in any way on my insignificant account, especially not after such a monumental, career-defining success for you and for your company. Her battles, her ongoing, relentless struggles in the fiercely competitive, often brutal, cutthroat world of modern business were still very much ongoing, still being fought daily with a remarkable courage, an inspiring tenacity, and an admirable integrity. Worrying about my long-finished fight, a deeply personal battle that had already ended in my crushing, ignominious defeat so many years ago, would be utterly pointless, a foolish indulgence, and a profound disservice to her efforts, to her trust in me. I simply can't, I won't, forgive him for what he did to you, Ryan. Her voice was suddenly fierce, unexpectedly passionate, filled with an almost startling, deeply moving protectiveness that warmed me to the very core of my being, chasing away some of the lingering chill. I want to see you use your incredible God-given talent again, Ryan. I want the world to see what you're truly capable of. Just hearing you say that, Lily, just knowing that someone, anyone, still believes in me that much, that passionately, it means more to me than you can possibly imagine. A thick, unexpected lump formed in my throat, making it suddenly, surprisingly difficult to speak, to articulate the depth of my gratitude. If I made any kind of move, Lily, if I even so much as tentatively tried to re-enter that unforgiving world, I explained, the old, familiar, suffocating sense of powerlessness, of utter futility, washing over me like a cold, dark tide, George would undoubtedly, and with malicious glee, take immediate, decisive action. He's vindictive, he's petty, and he has incredibly powerful, influential connections, connections he wouldn't hesitate to use. He could easily, and without a second thought, end up causing serious, irreparable trouble for the Institute, for Northwood University, the place where I once worked, where I once dreamed, for my mentor, Professor Cooper, who tried so hard, against such odds, to help me, to protect me. I just couldn't see the point, Lily. I couldn't justify taking such a significant, potentially devastating risk of possibly harming innocent, well-meaning people just for the incredibly slim, almost negligible chance of my own personal, professional return. Thank you, Lily, I said again, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name, a complex brew of gratitude, sorrow, and a flicker of something akin to hope. Truly, from the bottom of my heart. Just knowing that there's someone out there in this vast, indifferent world, someone as remarkable, as principled as you, who wants me to come back, who genuinely believes I still have something valuable, something unique to offer. That simple, profound knowledge alone is enough to make me genuinely, deeply happy, happier than I've been in a very long time. Don't say something so sad, Ryan. Please. Her voice was barely a whisper now, fragile and filled with a poignant, palpable sorrow that seemed to mirror, to echo, the deep, unhealed ache in my own soul. The taxi continued to drive silently, almost mournfully, through the inky, velvet blackness of the sleeping night, the rhythmic, hypnotic hum of the tires on the smooth asphalt carrying the hollow, melancholic, echoing sound of nothingness, of unspoken regrets, of dreams long dead and buried, of a future that might have been but now, perhaps, never could be. Even after I dropped her off at the glittering, almost ostentatious entrance of her luxurious high-rise apartment building, her opulent home in a world so vastly, so starkly different from my own humble, solitary existence, I couldn't manage to string together a proper, coherent, meaningful conversation with her. The immense, suffocating weight of the past, of all that had been said, and more importantly, unsaid between us, hung too heavily, too palpably, in the air, an invisible, insurmountable barrier. And after that deeply unsettling, emotionally draining day, after that raw, vulnerable, and ultimately cathartic confession, Lily Bennett, my most regular, most cherished passenger, stopped using my taxi. The days bled into weeks, a monotonous, unremarkable succession of anonymous fares and empty streets, and the sharp, persistent pang of her absence in my carefully structured, deliberately unexamined daily routine slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to dull, to fade into a dull, chronic ache. I missed her, of course, more than I cared to admit, even to myself. I missed her intelligent, probing questions, her sharp, incisive wit, her occasional, surprising moments of unguarded vulnerability, the unique, almost indefinable way her mere presence somehow managed to make the mundane, often soul-crushingly lonely act of driving feel less empty, less pointless, more significant. But eventually, inevitably, I got used to the silence again, to the endless parade of anonymous, forgettable faces reflected fleetingly in my rearview mirror, each one a brief, transient story that touched mine for a moment before disappearing forever. That particular Tuesday, too, was just another indistinguishable, unremarkable part of the usual grinding, monotonous routine. Another day to be endured rather than enjoyed. I went about my work as I always did, navigating the familiar, well-worn streets of the sprawling American city, picking up fares from the usual spots, listening with a practiced, detached sympathy to the endless, often tragic, sometimes comical, snippets of other people's lives, their hopes, their fears, their fleeting joys. Attention to all taxis currently on standby in the vicinity of the Grand City Central Station area. The sudden jarring crackle of the dispatcher's officious voice, cutting through the tinny strains of the jazz station I usually had playing softly, broke the quiet, almost meditative monotony of the late afternoon. We have a passenger requiring immediate, priority pickup directly in front of the main entrance of the city's Central Hotel, a VIP client. I was just about to start idly cruising, speculatively looking for a promising fare in the usually busy, bustling downtown financial district, when the urgent message came crackling over the radio. Following the precise instructions relayed by the dispatcher, a route I could have driven in my sleep, I turned the taxi smoothly around and headed straight, without deviation, to the opulent, almost intimidating, Grand Port Coker entrance of the prestigious City Central Hotel. When I arrived at the designated, clearly marked pickup spot, two men, both impeccably dressed in expensive-looking, tailored business suits, immediately, almost purposefully, approached the taxi. One was an older gentleman, perhaps in his late 60s, distinguished and impeccably dressed, with an almost palpable air of quiet, understated authority and immense wealth about him. The other, much younger, probably in his late 30s, was a strikingly handsome blond man, his sharp, almost predatory features somehow disturbingly, chillingly familiar, wearing a stylish, expensive-looking felt hat pulled down low, almost theatrically, over his eyes, obscuring his upper face. "To the main city station, please, driver," the older man instructed, his voice polite but firm, with the unmistakable accent of old money and Ivy League education. "And if you could possibly be quick, we're on a rather tight, inflexible schedule this afternoon." "Understood, sir. Of course," I replied, my voice a carefully cultivated mask of professional neutrality, betraying none of the sudden, inexplicable unease that had begun to prickle at the back of my neck. I led them into the spacious, luxuriously appointed back seat of the taxi, and then smoothly, expertly, started driving, merging seamlessly into the city's relentless, unforgiving, ever-surging stream of afternoon traffic. A few minutes of an almost uncomfortably charged, pregnant silence passed, broken only by the distant, muted hum of the city's ceaseless activity and the soft whir of the taxi's climate control, before the younger, blond man in the back seat suddenly, almost abruptly, and with a theatrical flourish, removed his hat. You, you look remarkably, almost uncannily familiar, driver. At the sound of that voice, that precise, unforgettable, hatefully familiar cadence, a voice I had fervently, desperately prayed to any listening deity I would never, ever have to hear again in this lifetime, my heart nearly stopped dead in my chest, a block of ice forming in its place. My blood ran cold, a frigid tide of disbelief and dawning horror. For a horrifying, stomach-churning, suspended moment, I glanced instinctively, almost unwillingly, at the polished surface of the rearview mirror, and indeed, staring back at me with an expression of dawning, unpleasant recognition was a face I recognized with a sickening, gut-wrenching clarity. George. My former nemesis, my academic rival, the callous, unrepentant architect of my professional ruin, the man who had single-handedly destroyed my dreams and shattered my life. George's eyes, initially casual, almost bored, widened in stunned, abject, almost comical shock as he, in turn, fully, unmistakably recognized me. The carefully constructed, painstakingly maintained composure I had cultivated over years of deliberate self-effacement and emotional detachment threatened to shatter into a million irreparable pieces. "Ryan," he gasped, his voice a strangled, disbelieving croak, a bizarre, unwelcome mixture of genuine disbelief and a dawning, distinctly unpleasant, almost predatory surprise. "What on earth are you doing here of all places, driving a common taxi for a living? You two gentlemen know each other then?" The older gentleman, Spencer, inquired, a note of mild, polite curiosity, perhaps a touch of amusement, in his cultured voice. George replied with a cynical, humorless, almost triumphant smirk, his eyes filled with a familiar, cutting, and utterly repulsive disdain. "Yeah, you could say that, Spencer. An old colleague, a contemporary from my rather less distinguished university days, as it happens. A man, as you can plainly see for yourself, who ultimately, and rather pathetically, ran away, tail between his legs, from the demanding, rigorous, and ultimately unforgiving world of higher mathematics." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white, struggling desperately to maintain my rapidly crumbling composure, but inside, a bitter, corrosive wave of long-suppressed, deeply buried irritation, of raw, unadulterated, murderous anger was fighting its way relentlessly, unstoppably, to the surface. "Whose fault, George, do you honestly, truly think that was?" I retorted, my voice dangerously low, almost a growl. The old, festering wounds. Wounds I had thought long scarred over, tearing open anew, bleeding fresh, hot, and agonizingly. "Oh right, of course." He chuckled, a dry, dismissive, utterly infuriating sound that grated on my already frayed nerves. "Yeah, that's right. My mistake. You lost to me, Ryan, fair and square, in open academic competition. I didn't lose to you, George. Not then, not ever." I corrected him, my voice shaking with a sudden, intense, almost uncontrollable fury, a rage I hadn't felt in years. "Mathematics, true, pure, untainted mathematics, lost that day, George. It lost to the insidious, corrupting, soul-destroying influence of dirty money and unchecked, unethical power, influences you so willingly, so gleefully embraced. You still pathetically think you're some kind of noble, self-appointed guardian of the mathematical world, Ryan, even now, after all this time?" He sneered, his lip curling in an expression of utter, undisguised contempt, his eyes glittering with malicious amusement. "How utterly, laughably arrogant of you, how pathetically self-deluded. There's infinitely more hope, more integrity, more genuine love for the subject in that belief, George, however misguided or arrogant you may think it is." I shot back, my words like bullets. "Than there is in your pathetic, transparent, and ultimately hollow delusion that you are still, in any meaningful way, a true, practicing mathematician after what you did, after how you achieved your so-called success." "What did you just say to me, you washed-up nobody?" George clicked his tongue in clear, undisguised, almost apoplectic annoyance, his handsome face flushing and ugly, mottled red with unrestrained anger. Unlike some people who chose to flee at the first sign of difficulty, he boasted, puffing out his chest in a display of arrogant self-importance, continued to conduct serious, groundbreaking research, even while making regular, high-profile television appearances and actively engaging with the adoring public, sharing my passion for numbers. But what about you, Ryan, my fallen friend? He continued, his voice dripping with condescending, feigned pity. What exactly are you doing now, Wasting your once promising intellect, your life, away in this pathetic, dead-end excuse for a so-called career? In this very taxi, George, this humble, unassuming vehicle, I said, my voice surprisingly, almost eerily calm despite the violent, tempestuous storm raging furiously, uncontrollably within me. I am constantly, ceaselessly, engaging with and solving incredibly complex, wonderfully challenging mathematical problems purely in my mind, for my own intellectual satisfaction. For all you know, George, for all your supposed brilliance and public acclaim, I might even crack one of the great, hitherto unsolved problems of our time right here, in this modest, unassuming vehicle, while you're busy preening for the cameras. Ha! Don't make me laugh. He scoffed loudly, dismissing my words with an arrogant, contemptuous wave of his hand. That's just sour grapes, Ryan, nothing more. The desperate, delusional fantasy of it has been a failure, someone who couldn't cut it in the real world of high-stakes academia. Is that so, George? I met his condescending, hate-filled gaze steadily in the rearview mirror, my own eyes cold and hard. Actually, if you must know, it's a rather quiet, remarkably conducive, and surprisingly stimulating environment for deep, uninterrupted thought, blissfully, wonderfully free of petty distractions like academic politics, backstabbing, two-faced rivals, and the corrupting influence of morally bankrupt sponsors. George sneered again, his face contorted with fury, clearly irritated beyond measure by my unexpected, pointed comeback, but the older man, Spencer, seemed genuinely, almost keenly, intrigued by our heated, increasingly personal exchange. So, you both are, or at least were at some point, professional mathematicians, I gather. He observed, his shrewd, intelligent eyes twinkling with a mixture of curiosity and a dawning, perceptive understanding. Ryan can hardly, with any degree of accuracy, be called a true mathematician anymore, Spencer. Not really. George interjected dismissively, eager to reassert his perceived superiority. He effectively threw away any chance, any hope of that ever happening again all those years ago, when he chose to run. Why the sudden, almost unseemly rush to judgment, George, if I may ask? Spencer inquired, his tone still mild, almost gentle, but with a distinct, almost palpable underlying edge of disapproval, of subtle warning. Just a little harmless, idle curiosity, Spencer. That's all it is, I assure you. George muttered, his earlier arrogant bravado faltering noticeably, almost visibly, under Spencer's calm, unwavering, and increasingly penetrating scrutiny. I'm certainly not rushing to any hasty or unwarranted conclusions, not at all. He then abruptly turned his head to look out the window, his expression one of clear, sullen discontent and simmering, impotent resentment. Spencer. Yes, if my memory served me correctly from Lily's earlier, almost casual comment, this distinguished, powerful older gentleman was indeed George's influential, long-term sponsor, the very man whose substantial financial backing and powerful connections had likely, almost certainly, enabled George's unethical, meteoric, and ultimately undeserved rise to prominence in the academic world. By the way, gentlemen, Spencer said, his voice suddenly, unexpectedly lighter, almost whimsical, as if a new, amusing thought had just occurred to him. Purely out of curiosity, what's your favorite number? The unexpected, almost bizarre, and seemingly irrelevant question took both George and me completely, utterly by surprise, momentarily derailing our acrimonious confrontation. George, ever the consummate opportunist, the sycophant, was predictably quick to answer, clearly eager to impress his powerful, indispensable patron, to regain his favor. 407 Spencer, without a doubt, he declared, a smug, self-satisfied, almost fawning smile playing on his lips. It's a truly exquisite three-digit narcissistic number, an Armstrong number, as you surely know. Absolutely beautiful, don't you think, in its inherent mathematical purity, its almost divine elegance? Interesting. Most interesting indeed. Spencer mused, a thoughtful, almost inscrutable expression on his distinguished face. And, rather coincidentally, almost serendipitously, it also just so happens to be my own birthday, April the 7th. A number clearly, almost mystically, destined for me, a powerful, undeniable sign of my deep, personal, almost spiritual connection to the sublime, transcendent elegance of pure mathematics. George preened visibly, almost purring with self-satisfaction, clearly immensely pleased with himself, convinced he had chosen wisely, impressively. Ah, I see. How fitting. Spencer pondered this for a long, pregnant moment, his gaze unreadable, almost unsettling. Then, he slowly, deliberately, turned his full attention to me. And you, Ryan? What's your favorite number, if you have one? Let's see now. I paused for a moment, feigning deep, serious thought, before responding with a deliberately light, almost casual, disarmingly nonchalant tone. The number on this very taxi's license plate, sir, that's the one. That's my absolute favorite, no question about it. George scoffed loudly, almost contemptuously, at my seemingly mundane, almost absurd answer, his disdain, his sense of intellectual superiority, palpable in the confined space of the car. What a mind-numbingly boring, utterly unimaginative answer, Ryan, even for you. He sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. To claim to love to have a favorite, a random, meaningless string of numbers on a common, everyday license plate? How utterly, embarrassingly pedestrian, how pathetically uninspired. However, to my profound, almost disbelieving surprise, Spencer smiled, a genuine, warm, knowing smile that reached his eyes. 1729. He stated calmly, his voice clear, precise, and carrying an unmistakable note of quiet authority. If I recall my extensive mathematical lore correctly, and I believe I do, that particular number is, in fact, quite famous, almost legendary, in certain circles as the Hardy-Ramanujan number. Often referred to, rather charmingly, almost poetically, I believe, as the taxicab number. What? Impossible. George's jaw dropped, his face a mask of stunned, incredulous, almost comical disbelief. As expected, sir, of a truly worldly, intellectually curious, and remarkably successful man like yourself, Spencer, I said, my voice laced with a sincere, almost reverent admiration. You notice, you appreciate, even the smallest, most subtle, most easily overlooked details, the hidden gems. Haha, indeed I do, Ryan. Indeed I do. Spencer chuckled, a rich, warm sound, his eyes twinkling with amusement and a dawning, appreciative respect. And I must say, my dear Ryan, I greatly, genuinely admire your cleverness, your quick wit, your impeccable sense of occasion, and, perhaps most impressively, the remarkable, almost audacious foresight you displayed in orchestrating such a uniquely fitting and delightfully memorable setup beforehand. George's handsome face visibly, almost painfully, stiffened, his eyes darting nervously, erratically, between Spencer and me, as if suddenly, terrifyingly, sensing that the very ground beneath his feet was treacherously, irrevocably unstable, about to give way. George, Spencer said, his voice now entirely devoid of its earlier warmth and conviviality, replaced by a chillingly calm, almost surgical finality that brooked no argument, no appeal. I'm very much afraid, my boy, that I'll have to withdraw my rather substantial, and I believe quite generous, sponsorship of your work, effective immediately as of this moment. Your answer, George, while technically superficially correct, I suppose, unfortunately lacks a certain, shall we say, flair, a demonstrable depth of genuine understanding, a true intellectual spark that I now clearly see with newfound, regrettable clarity that I absolutely require in those I choose to support. Wait, Spencer, please. George stammered, his face paling dramatically, his voice cracking with desperation, with dawning panic. You're joking, right, Spencer? You must be. This is just some kind of elaborate, cruel test, isn't it? A way to gauge my loyalty, my composure under pressure? If you genuinely, sincerely believe this is some kind of elaborate joke, George, Spencer replied, his voice as cold and hard as glacial ice, his eyes like steel, then you clearly, unequivocally, lack the fundamental intellectual acuity, the basic common sense, the essential perceptive ability to even begin to comprehend the humor, were there any to be found, which, I assure you, there is not. No, well, I, I mean, ha. George sputtered incoherently, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him, rendered utterly speechless, almost catatonic by the sudden, brutal, and utterly unexpected turn of devastating events. Don't make me repeat myself, George. It would be unpleasant for both of us. Spencer's voice was quiet now, almost a whisper, but it carried the unmistakable, unshakable weight of an irrevocable final decision. This, I regret to inform you, is goodbye. Ugh! A strangled, almost inhuman sound, a sound of pure, unadulterated despair, escaped George's trembling lips. I pulled the taxi smoothly, almost silently, over to the side of the busy, indifferent city road, and, without uttering a single word, without even a glance in his direction, reached back to open George's door with a decisive click. He looked as if he had 1,000 more things to say, a torrent of desperate protests, pathetic pleas, and bitter recriminations welling up inside him. But eventually, a look of utter, abject, soul-crushing defeat washed over his once arrogant features, and he slowly, reluctantly, almost like a condemned man, got out of the car. He knew better, far, far better, than to further anger, to further provoke someone as powerful, as influential, and now as thoroughly disappointed as Spencer. Well then, George, I said, my voice carefully, deliberately neutral, devoid of any discernible emotion, any hint of triumph or pity, do try, if you can, to enjoy the remainder of your undoubtedly eventful time in our fair city. Ugh, was his only pathetic, almost whimpered reply. George stood forlornly on the bustling sidewalk, a bizarre, almost grotesque mixture of profound, shell-shocked disbelief, sputtering, impotent anger, and dawning, soul-chilling despair contorting his handsome, now ashen face. But he left without uttering another single word, a truly pathetic, almost tragic figure, a monument to his own arrogance and folly. As I carefully, almost reverently, started the car again, merging seamlessly, almost poetically, back into the ceaseless, indifferent flow of city traffic, Spencer gave a small, almost imperceptible, yet deeply satisfied, quiet smile. Ryan, he said, his tone now much warmer, more congenial, almost friendly. I'd very much like to have a proper, private word with you, if you have a moment to spare, that is. What is it, sir? I asked, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest with a bewildering, almost overwhelming mixture of trepidation, disbelief, and a burgeoning, unfamiliar, almost intoxicating hope. I recently made the considered, strategic decision to partner with MW Corporation, with President Bennett's dynamic company, on a significant, potentially groundbreaking new international venture, Spencer explained, his eyes twinkling with entrepreneurial excitement. And I must tell you, Ryan, quite frankly, that President Lillie Bennett herself strongly, passionately, and very, very persuasively advocated for your direct, personal involvement in this project from its very inception. What? You can't be serious. I was stunned into a rare, almost complete silence, my mind reeling from the unexpected, almost unbelievable revelation. Lillie? She actually did that? For me? After all this time? Spencer nodded, a knowing, almost paternal look in his wise eyes. Indeed, she did, Ryan. Most emphatically. She spoke with great conviction, with undeniable passion, about both your exceptional, almost singular intellectual talent and your unimpeachable, unwavering moral character. For a long, breathless moment, I was utterly, completely at a loss for words, overwhelmed by the sheer, unexpected magnanimity of her actions, the depth of her belief in me. I hadn't realized, hadn't even begun to suspect, that Lily, my former passenger, the woman I had driven and talked with, had been working so diligently, so passionately, so selflessly on my behalf behind the scenes, fighting for me when I had long given up fighting for myself. A powerful, surging wave of profound, almost unbearable gratitude, so intense, so overwhelming it almost brought tears to my eyes, washed over me, cleansing away years of bitterness and regret. Lily is a truly remarkable, exceptionally gifted young woman, Ryan. A rare talent. Spencer continued, his voice filled with a genuine, almost unreserved admiration that I knew was not easily earned. I have quickly come to trust her astute judgment, her sharp instincts, implicitly, and I'm now entirely, unequivocally confident that her glowing, almost effusive assessment of you, of your potential, is entirely, demonstrably sound. Yes, sir, you're absolutely right. I finally managed to say, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite suppress, an emotion that felt suspiciously like hope. She truly is an amazing, an absolutely extraordinary person in every conceivable way. And I believe I understand you much better now too, Ryan, after today's illuminating events. Spencer said, his gaze direct, perceptive, and surprisingly kind, appraising me with a newfound respect. After witnessing your rather spirited exchange with your former colleague, Mr. George, and carefully considering Lily's strong, unwavering endorsement, I now firmly, unreservedly believe that you will be an invaluable, perhaps even indispensable asset to our exciting, upcoming international project. My heart swelled with a profound, almost painful gratitude, a feeling of being truly seen, of being genuinely valued, of being offered a second chance, a feeling I hadn't experienced, hadn't dared to hope for, in what felt like an entire, wasted lifetime. Honestly, sir, I'm completely, utterly taken aback, truly, deeply surprised by all of this. I confessed, still struggling to fully process the sudden seismic, almost unbelievable shift in my fortunes, in my very perception of myself and my future. But if Lily, if President Bennett, truly has that much unwavering, unconditional faith in me, in my abilities, then I desperately, more than anything in this world, want to live up to her trust, to prove her unequivocally right, to not let her down. Spencer nodded slowly, a deep, genuine satisfaction evident in his expression, in the warm approval in his eyes. Excellent, Ryan. That's precisely what I had hoped to hear. Then let's by all means arrange a formal, introductory meeting at your earliest convenience, very soon, with Lily included, of course, to discuss the specific details of the project and your potential, pivotal role within it. I would look forward to that very, very much, sir. More than you know. The taxi continued to glide quietly, almost serenely, with a newfound purpose, toward its designated destination, the myriad city lights blurring into a vibrant, almost psychedelic kaleidoscope of dazzling, hopeful color. Inside me, a veritable maelstrom of powerful, conflicting emotions swirled, a dizzying vortex of heady anticipation for this unexpected, almost miraculous new challenge, a lingering touch of understandable anxiety about stepping back, after so long, into a demanding, high-pressure world I had deliberately, decisively long forsaken, and an overwhelming, all-encompassing sense of profound, almost reverent gratitude towards Lily, towards her unwavering, inexplicable belief in me. I felt, with a sudden, exhilarating, almost dizzying certainty, as though my own personal story, stagnant, mired in regret and apathy for so very, very long, was finally, thrillingly, miraculously, beginning to move forward again, to gain momentum, as I took this tentative, yet undeniably momentous, life-altering new step. Where shall I take you now, sir, if you don't mind my asking? I inquired, my voice, to my own surprise, betraying none of the tumultuous, chaotic storm of emotion raging powerfully, almost uncontrollably, within me. To my hotel for now, please, Ryan. The Grand City Central, if you would. Spencer replied, a small, pleased, almost knowing smile playing on his lips. I believe I have some rather important calls to make, some arrangements to finalize. Driving through the vibrant, pulsating, almost electric heart of the sprawling night city, a city suddenly alive with a million new, intoxicating possibilities, I could feel a profound, almost spiritual sense of renewal, of a precious, unexpected, almost undeserved second chance at a meaningful life, a life I never, ever thought I'd receive, washing over me, cleansing me, invigorating me. Ryan, thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart. Lily's voice, bright, effervescent, and filled with a genuine infectious warmth that seemed to fill the entire car, came from the passenger seat beside me, where she now often sat, a comfortable companion rather than just a fare. Thanks to your incredible, invaluable insights and your unwavering, tireless dedication, the collaborative project is moving along incredibly, astonishingly smoothly, far exceeding all our most optimistic initial expectations and projections. Not at all, Lily. Please. I demurred, a practiced, almost reflexive humility, though a pleased, undeniable warmth spread through me at her sincere, generous praise. You're the one, Lily, who truly single-handedly convinced the formidable Spencer to come on board with this ambitious venture in the first place, with your compelling vision, your unshakable tenacity, your impressive foresight, and your undeniably brilliant business skill. But without your profound, almost intuitive knowledge of the subject matter, Ryan, and your unique, almost uncanny insight into the complex, often counterintuitive algorithms that underpin the entire project, she insisted, her eyes sparkling with an irresistible combination of intelligence and affection. We honestly, truly wouldn't have made it this far, not even close. That's an undeniable, incontrovertible fact, Ryan, and you know it. Ha ha, well, thank you, Lily, if you say so. I chuckled, a light, easy sound, catching her gentle, deeply appreciative gaze in the rearview mirror, a gaze that now held a new, profound depth of shared understanding and mutual respect. But you are quite the gallant gentleman, aren't you, Ryan? She teased, her tone light, playful, and undeniably fond, quitting your established, if somewhat unconventional, job as a respected city taxi driver just to become my exclusive, personal chauffeur and resident mathematician in residence, all rolled into one. Well, the pay is considerably, significantly better this way, Lily. You absolutely have to admit that. I retorted, playing along with her light-hearted banter, a comfortable, easy rhythm now firmly established between us. Ryan, you really truly don't have to worry about the mundane aspects of the driving anymore, you know, she said, her expression suddenly turning more serious, more earnest, her voice softening with genuine concern. You can, and you absolutely should, focus entirely, wholeheartedly on the mathematics, on the research, on the intellectual challenges that truly ignite your passion. That's where your true, undeniable passion, your unique genius, lies, isn't it, Ryan? We both know that. Thank you, Lily. Thank you for understanding. I said, my voice sincere, imbued with a depth of gratitude that words could barely express. It truly, honestly means more to me than I can possibly say to hear you say that, to have your unwavering, unconditional support and belief in me. A sudden, almost forgotten thought occurred to me then, a lingering, unresolved curiosity I hadn't voiced before, a ghost from a past I was slowly, painstakingly, trying to lay to rest, and I decided, on impulse, to ask her. By the way, Lily, just out of curiosity, whatever happened to George recently after his rather public fall from grace? Have you heard anything at all through the academic grapevine? He completely, irrevocably lost his substantial financial backing from Spencer, as you witnessed firsthand, Ryan, she replied, a grim, almost chilling satisfaction evident in her voice. a steely glint in her usually soft eyes. And since that rather dramatic day, his once lofty academic status and his carefully, almost obsessively, cultivated public reputation have been steadily, relentlessly crumbling, almost disintegrating before his very eyes, like a sandcastle before an incoming tide. It seems that people, his colleagues in the academic community, the grant-awarding bodies, and even the wider, adoring public have finally, belatedly, realized that he lacks any real, substantive, original ability, that his entire glittering, much-lauded success was largely built on bluster, on borrowed glory, and on the unacknowledged, often stolen work of others. I see. How? Unfortunate for him. I mused, a strange, unexpected, almost unwelcome sense of detached, almost clinical pity for the man, for my former tormentor, surfacing unexpectedly from some hidden, forgotten corner of my heart. If he had only, just only, sincerely, honestly, and diligently continued with his own, perhaps more modest, but genuine research contributions, instead of resorting to such desperate, despicable measures, things might have turned out very, very differently for him in the end, perhaps even happily. The very fact that he felt he had to resort to such extreme, unethical, and ultimately self-destructive tactics as sabotaging you, Ryan, his most brilliant and promising contemporary, Lily said, her voice firm, unwavering, filled with an unshakable, righteous conviction, showed his true, contemptible, morally bankrupt colors from the very, very start, for anyone who cared to look closely enough. After that rather somber, reflective exchange, Lily fell silent, her gaze turned outward again, thoughtfully, almost wistfully, watching the mesmerizing, ever-shifting tapestry of the vibrant night scenery unfold in a breathtaking panorama beyond the car window. Eventually, inevitably, we arrived at the familiar, imposing, almost fortress-like structure of her luxurious high-rise condominium building, its multitude of glittering, welcoming lights a familiar, comforting beacon in the encroaching darkness of the late evening. As I pulled the car smoothly up to the grand, covered entrance, she spoke up suddenly, her voice a little hesitant now, a touch uncertain, a subtle change from her usual confident demeanor. Ryan, I have something rather important, something personal I'd like to talk about with you if you have a moment. Will you? Will you perhaps come up to my apartment for a few minutes? Please? All right, Lily. Of course. I agreed without a moment's hesitation, a strange, inexplicable sense of anticipation, of something significant about to happen, stirring within me. Following her graceful lead, I stepped out of the car and into the silent, swift, almost futuristic elevator, which whisked us upwards, effortlessly, through the towering building. Soon, we were stepping out directly into the stunning, minimalist elegance of her breathtakingly beautiful apartment. From the expansive, almost panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows of the remarkably spacious, artfully decorated living room, the glittering, almost infinite night view of the sprawling, vibrant city stretched out before us in all its breathtaking, almost intoxicating, glittering, jewel-like splendor. Lily, looking a little uncharacteristically nervous now, her usual calm, collected composure slightly, almost imperceptibly, frayed around the edges, motioned for me to take a seat on the plush, invitingly comfortable, cream-colored sofa. Ryan, she began, her voice soft but infused with an undeniable seriousness, a palpable weight of importance. There's actually something very specific, something rather important, that I'd like to ask of you, a proposition, if you will. What is it, Lily? I asked, my curiosity undeniably piqued by her earnest, almost solemn demeanor, by the uncharacteristic tremor in her voice. Would you, Ryan, would you perhaps consider going to America with me for an extended period? America? The question, so unexpected, so momentous, caught me completely, utterly off guard, leaving me momentarily speechless, my mind racing to process its profound implications. Yes, Ryan, America, she confirmed, her beautiful, intelligent eyes searching mine intently, hopefully, almost pleadingly. There's a new, incredibly significant, and potentially transformative international project we're about to launch. A cutting-edge research initiative in very close, synergistic collaboration with a highly prestigious, world-renowned research institute based over there on the West Coast. And Ryan, I really, truly, desperately need your help, your unique expertise, your brilliant mind on this one. Your unique, almost unparalleled expertise in this specific field would be absolutely invaluable, almost irreplaceable, to the success of this venture. For a long, suspended, almost timeless moment, I was utterly, completely taken aback, my mind struggling, almost failing, to fully comprehend the enormity, the sheer audacity of her unexpected, life-altering request. But then, looking deeply into her hopeful, earnest, almost luminous eyes, seeing the undisguised vulnerability, the profound trust she was placing in me, a slow, warm, almost incredulous smile spread, unbidden, across my face. "If it's something you genuinely, truly need, Lily," I said at last, my voice filled with a warmth, a sincerity, a depth of feeling that surprised even myself, "then I'd be more than happy. I'd be honored to help you in any way I possibly can, with whatever you require." "Really? Oh, Ryan, do you truly mean it?" Her face, already so expressive, lit up with a radiant, almost incandescent, disbelieving joy, a joy so pure, so unadulterated, it seemed to illuminate the entire vast room. "Oh, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, I am, after all, your dedicated personal driver, am I not?" I teased gently, immensely enjoying the soft, becoming blush that crept slowly, enchantingly, up her graceful neck, tinting her cheeks a lovely, delicate shade of rose. "You're being mean again, Ryan," she retorted, her voice a delightful, irresistible, almost musical mix of mock, playful indignation and genuine, uncontainable happiness, her cheeks now a lovely, captivating shade of rosy pink. "I don't mean just as a driver, Ryan. You know that perfectly well. And not just as a brilliant, indispensable mathematician either, though you are certainly both of those things, and so much more." She took a deep, steadying breath, her gaze locking with mine, suddenly intense, direct, and unwavering, holding me captive. "What I need, Ryan, what I truly, deeply, desperately want, is you. Just you, Ryan. Only you.